Good morning. Today we have a beautiful morning here in Nairobi. It is a bit chilly, but we believe that as the day progresses, we will have some sunlight. Welcome to New Day TV, both on Facebook and YouTube. I am your host, Chepkoech Towett, on the tackle today on State of the Nation. And with me are two gentlemen who have made their way quite early, in fact, if I may say so. And thank you for heeding to our call this morning. We have Advice Mundalo, who is the national youth leader for Jubilee. And we have Churchill Saoke, who is a governance and politics expert. Karibuni sana, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And the topic this morning is the budget reading expectations and the SHIF, the Social Health Insurance Fund, which is supposed to roll out sometime this month. So, gentlemen, how are you this morning?
Very well. How is your morning? It's a beautiful morning. I'm glad to be here.
It is a great morning. It is just a bit cold, but we are holding on.
Yes.
Advice, how are you?
I'm very fine. Like everyone else, it's a beautiful morning in Nairobi. At least the cold is not as bad as the floods, so we can do with the cold. So I think, and of course we have a lot of things happening in the state of affairs of the country. We now have a lot of conversations going around about both the topics we're mentioning and other topics that we've seen in the media currently. So it's a political morning as usual in Kenya.
I like how you're saying as usual, because many a times it is said that 24 hours in Kenya is a lot of time. Very many things would happen. Unaweza enda kulala, everything was settled. Ukiamka, things are on fire.
Mm-hmm. So, very true, very true.
All right, so Churchill,
yes.
At least today you have made it.
I always make it.
There's a history.
Chep, I always make it. Umeanza kunianika mapema.
Umesema nimeanza na propaganda.
Umeanza na propaganda,
No, on a lighter note, but karibu sana.
Asante, it's a beautiful place. I mean, this you have a very beautiful place, and I'm excited to be here.
All right.
Yeah.
So, gentlemen, it is our busiest week, I think, in the country. Given that about a month or so, the conversations that have been ongoing have been largely on the finance bill, which we know informs how our budget is going to take shape.
Yeah.
And the finance bill, we have talked about it exhaustively because we know the implications. We have seen the implications of both the good and the not so good. We have also had the voice of Kenyans on this. We have had the voice of the experts on this and their differing opinions, as well as the government's thinking and why they think we should go this way. And by government, we mean Treasury, and also the presidency has commented on the finance bill. But quickly, before we delve into the budget, what is your opinion on the finance bill? And we saw Angela Ambitho and Infotrack do a poll, and 77% of Kenyans are opposed to it. And 87% are saying musiguze mkate. Advice.
Yeah, first of all, Towett, I have a very bad history with the polls, having been in Azimio in the last election, because we had so much that we heard about the polls that was not necessarily the reality on the ground. But having said that, again, my issue with the finance bill is, first of all, very positive in terms of appreciation of Kenyans, because most of the time, matters of the finance bill and such pertinent issues of this country have not been heavily canvassed by people. Sometimes this has gone through and gotten done, and nobody's even aware that there was a finance bill in the first place. So by the mere fact that as it stands today, Kenyans can actually come out to discuss the finance bill is a very good thing. That Kenyans are interested in their affairs, Kenyans want to know what exactly is happening, and I think that's a step in the right direction. Then the public participation aspect of it is also very good. Remember, from the last finance bill, which was the first finance bill of this government, it recorded the highest number of public participation since independence. That shows you the willingness that Kenyans are starting to have in tackling their own matters. So for me there, first of all, it's a step in the right direction, and it should be encouraged. And we've been able to see several elements of the finance bill change just because of this public participation. So the narrative being peddled by some quarters that it is useless for Kenyans to participate because the results are already predetermined, I think it's a false thing that should not be advanced. But be that as it may, we have elements of the finance bill that I totally do not agree with, because some are punitive and some are purely discriminative. Because when you talk about, for instance, the tax on the motor vehicle,
2.5%.
2.5%, it is very discriminatory, and it's actually a tax that disenfranchises the lowest cadre of the car owner, and instead of even the highest cadre of the car owner, because a person with a car of 60 million is going to pay 100,000, but this person with a car of 500,000
is going to pay 5,000.
So you look at it, and then it becomes discriminatory, because when you accumulate the number of people with the smaller cars, they are actually paying way higher
than the number of people
than the one luxury car. So we have such kind of taxes that I think those ones should be able to be relooked at. Even on the matters of bread, as people have talked about, and wheat. And I know it's a whole, when you read the bill, it's a whole conundrum, because it's like wheat products, the government actually does tax refunds to the people who deal with this product. Yeah. So it's an explanation that needs to come out very clearly, because I have also not been able to canvass it very clearly, because it looks like what we are being told and what is actually into the bill is not necessarily, they are not tallying. Because remember, this bill is like an introductory statement of the entire thing. And how many pages is it in the first place?
It's huge. It's
a huge thing. So the matter of explaining, Treasury should really try to make people understand. Because when you don't make people understand, then the politics takes center stage. Unfortunately, with the politics, people take one or two items of the finance bill. Yeah, they'll just go to the villages and tell people, now you're being told you'll not afford bread. And that is the whole conversation we have for the whole time. So even when public participation is only based on bread, everything we're discussing is only based on, but we're talking about an entire thing. And then parliamentarians also have to be honest with Kenyans, because before it becomes a bill in the first place, it goes through these parliamentary processes. But then we have a parliament that wants to get surprised together with us, wants to look like they were not aware what was in parliament. I think it's a culture that we must also stop, because parliamentarians cannot be behaving like the rest of us.
Right.
Yeah, they cannot pretend to be surprised with us. No, they must be held to higher responsibility.
Right. Quite the opening statement, and as usual, advice does not hold back. It comes through. Churchill.
Yes.
Your thoughts on the finance bill?
Well, first, it's important for us to appreciate, and I recognize the level with which the people of Kenya have taken this discussion. And it's a positive step, and I agree with that, because it means that as a population, we are continually being very conscious about very key decisions, especially within the fiscal space, that affect, because remember, the national budgets has a huge implication on our micro and macroeconomic decisions that we make as a country and as individuals. And so the engagement of the people in this budget process, for me, is also very positive. And it also acts as an opportunity to put the governments of the day and decision makers on track in terms of, they got to be accountable and things like that throughout the whole fiscal year. And over and above that, of course, we will ordinarily expect that nobody wants to be taxed, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to be taxed. These are very hard decisions, because in the long run, government support their programs and support their development through taxation as one of the means of revenue generation. And as I have said, nobody will always want to be taxed, and these resistance are expected. And it's therefore incumbent on decision makers to ensure that, how then do we balance these fiscal decisions so that we reduce the level of resistance from the population? Because these things have political implications, whether we like them or not. And there you will find that governments of the day, in as much as they'll make very good fiscal decisions in terms of increasing taxes with very good intentions, those who are opposed to governments of the day will take advantage of that and try to portray the decision makers in the wrong way. So, of course, the other thing that is important for us to mention is that there are various aspects, and as advisors has alluded to, the finance bill is a huge document with very many provisions. And the moment we focus on one thing, and this is tactics of decision makers use, they make you to focus on one thing and you forget all the other things. Then in the long run, they actually focus on the part that they will concede on. All right? So you will debate over it and debate over it. By the time they're making the decision, they will actually say, we have retracted this part. But the rest of the other parts...
So they've gotten what they wanted anyway.
Exactly. So I think as we interrogate the finance bill, we got to be very careful. And do not just focus on the one thing that the public policy makers want you to focus on. Look at the entire thing. There are those parts that are very, very bad for specific businesses. There are some parts that are very good for certain businesses. Because you see, the finance bill, in as much as there are segments that might be detrimental to certain businesses, there are also other parts that offer opportunities. And I think that deeper interrogation of all these parts then provides a framework for businesses and people who have interest in venturing into new opportunities to take advantage of.
All right. So Churchill is saying we focus. Otherwise, that is how you get nailed, So before we now go deeper into the budget expectations and the SHIF, and to just see, so it is being rolled out, what should we also expect from the SHIF, given that it's a new financial year? So will the budget also help in rolling out the program? Will the budget also help in dealing with some of the issues that we saw arise in this financial year that we are just about to end? But before we do that, I would like for us to quickly look at our newspapers this morning. And at the Standard, or rather on the Standard, the headline is Uhuru turns to God in Ruto money fight. I don't know why you gentlemen are laughing.
Why turning to God?
I don't know why you are laughing, but asking God to save us all. A former president says he has been forced to foot his bills contrary to the law. Okay, gentlemen. He wonders why State House has not remitted money to his office yet it is in the budget. Advice. This is you. I don't know whether to call him your boss or your former boss, but there is boss underlined. Why are you laughing?
No, I think the headline is just sensational. Yeah. Because I think we should be turning to God every time. Yeah, even in times of good. But then on this conversation about the Uhuru, because this has been there, and I saw Kanzedena speak to it yesterday during a presser. And the first thing I would want to say about this is, first of all, every former head of state who is entitled to their benefits should actually be able to get their benefits. We shouldn't be able to play cat and mouse with such kind of issues, because those are people who served the country and they're entitled. And this is the law we gave ourselves as a country. So it should not be something that we should be able, it should not be a push and pull, because we are getting ourselves in a situation where now everyone who leaves office will start getting worried about what then will happen post their time in office. But be that as it may, again, the previous office holders, in the same Retirement Benefits Act, there are also provisions that also must be followed strictly. For instance, the Retirement Benefits Act talks about a former president should not be able to hold office that is political 6 months after he leaves office. It says that the former president should not be able to participate in political activity. So you see, these are contradicting things. So on one end, once you're able to, you're requesting what is entitled to you as retirement benefits, but you must also observe what the law says in regard to that. And then as well, we must also be able to look at what are the budget provisions and was the money released. Are we talking about money that has been denied or money that might not have been released? Are we talking about money that is at the State House under the control of budget, or money that is at Treasury? So that should be able to come out. And also, it should also, when you look deeply into it, you realize there are some elements that actually government has been able to fund the office of the former president. And they are saying, for instance, every pension to the former president has been paid. Travels of the former president are taken care of. And you saw in the statement by the spokesperson, and the spokesperson says, the argument is the office, and this office, we have an office of the former president that is in Nyali, but the current office, and Kanze Dena's statement was saying that they need the office in Nairobi, and so they need the office paid for in Nairobi. But look at also what government is trying to say. They are saying, if we already have an office, why are we paying for another office when we have already bought an office that should belong to the former president? So we have all these things that need to be really canvassed. I think it's more a dialogue thing that should happen between the two heads of state, because one current and the other one former. I don't think at that level, these are things that should be discussed in the media, on the street.
And such headlines.
And such kind of headlines. I think it removes the dignity from the office of the former president, because he is a person who has served the country at a ranking level. He should be an advisor to the government. He is someone who should be held with very high respect. And he's actually one of our diplomats as well. They carry our name as a country. So we shouldn't be able to get to this place where we are having some of these infighting and some of these things being spewed to the media. And I think it just degenerates the conversation. I saw Kanzi with an entire file yesterday on one of the media houses, reading letter after letter, which letter went to State House and which letter was received from the office of the fourth president. I don't think we should be having those kind of conversations where we are now sharing letters from that level of office in the public, and those now letters are spewing all over. I think these are conversations that should just be held between the two and an agreement reached. Otherwise, in fact, the more we are able to delve deeper into these things, the more we are just hurting Kenyans, because we are making Kenyans get to wonder why the office of a former president has to receive 4 new cars. You see, we get now people to start wondering, why is this happening?
Scrutinizing.
Yeah, we are now scrutinizing this issue and people wondering. And one car is being budgeted at 46 million. I don't know, Churchill looks richer, he might know those kinds of
Oh yes.
Churchill has received the riches.
Oh,
Attacking
yes.
jokes.
I'm not editing.
You might know those kind of cars. But just you see that the more we are able to talk about these things, the more Kenyans now are getting a deeper understanding of it. And sometimes, not that the thing is wrong, but it can just be annoying to a common Kenyan who is struggling with life out there.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Advice. Thank you, Churchill.
Yeah.
What precedents also are we setting? Because I think that it is now time to separate the office from the office holder.
Yeah.
That it doesn't matter who is the former president.
Yeah.
What belongs to them belongs to, whatever belongs to that office should be remitted to that office, regardless of the office holder.
I agree with you, Chep, because you see, I think being in the corner office, and I just want to look at it holistically beyond the presidency, because I've seen this also taking place in other institutions, other government institutions. Being in the corner office it looks luxurious, it looks red carpet, but I think sometimes we forget about what it really takes to be there. Some of the sacrifices that some of these people really have to go through to make things work, the level of responsibility that comes with it, that they shoulder. And I think that if we look at it from that perspective, beyond the glamour, beyond the the red carpet that they see, then it becomes incumbent on us, the population, to ensure that we give any holder of an office or any former holder of an office, state or non-state, the dignity they deserve. Because then that dignity becomes transferable from one level to another. Because you see, today you hold an office, tomorrow you not hold it. And you will expect to be treated in a given manner especially when you look at public service, it can be very thankless. You become useful at the time that you're in office. The moment you get out of that office, you realize that you sacrificed a lot of your time, that should have been for family, should have been for things. Yet, once you're gone out of, nobody even cares about you. Nobody
That
even
reminds
wanna-
me of the Tangen demo. I
Exactly.
will never forget
Exactly.
what he said after he left office.
Exactly. So you realize that the only little bits of things that you remain with are some of these recognitions that are put in law. And it's my hope that the government of the day will see this, that, today they're going to be in power. They, after 10 years or so, someone else will come. And worse be it if a beast comes to replace you, it's going to be worse than what you did to the former. So if we set this as a precedence, it becomes an advantage. Look at what the Americans do to their former presidents, irrespective of the political party where you are.
We never hear or see such issues.
They are respected. They are, and they become, as advisors said, they become diplomats. They become diplomatic figures in that country. Key non-state actors or state actors that then help the country to advance a foreign policy. It will be very dangerous and it will be very detrimental for example, Kenya now advocating for the African Union chairmanship, the former president being the chair of the African Union observer mission in South Africa. And, within the community of nations, we see that the former president is being treated badly. It really augurs badly for the government of the day. So I think the bigger picture is that there might be those political differences, and as of now, the way they are talking in the media, I think the two gentlemen just need to call each other.
They should call each other and save us from
because
airing dirty laundry.
Now what they're doing is they are now having the spokesperson fighting. And trust you me, the spokespersons will not solve the problem.
It's true. Only them can solve that problem. All right. And part of the headlines at the Standard say, reject punitive taxes, has plead with MPs. So this will form part of our discussion today, because we have also seen captains of industry come out to say, and like Churchill said, there are aspects to the finance bill that is good for Kenyans, but there is also aspects that need to be relooked into. And because we have a discourse with our constitution, that is public participation, I think this is where tunafaa kuchambua kama wa Kenya, and just come out and say, this is for us, this one rekebisha hapa. And even Treasury, like you said, I went through that finance bill. And you can imagine, you go through it because, for example, I of my job, but a normal Kenyan, over 300 pages, do you think they have time, even just to understand what some of those terms mean?
Yeah.
Because with my little knowledge of economics, I was struggling to understand some of those terms. So you can imagine mama mboga pale ama mtu boda hustler anashindwa hii ni nini, So I feel like as Treasury comes up with this finance bill, they should also bring a simplified one.
An abridged version.
Exactly.
And actually the one the bill that we are provided with is actually purported to be that
the abridged.
That is the abridged, simplified, simple version that is a summary. So the summary is already 300 pages. So what is, in my view, supposed to happen more about the bill is the explanation about it. We must be able to have avenues where, for us to have effective public participation, government should also aid the understanding of the people so that they can then participate effectively. Because yes, there is public participation out there, but most of the country is not even understanding the bill in the first place.
The terms
so
being
if
used.
they are not understanding this bill, then what is their level of participation? So we must be able to have forums where I think the government should help the people understand the bill. And that should be able to come through a Treasury, because I'm sure Treasury has a communication, a PR desk that can be able to make this explained to the people. I look at a situation where they would be able to come to the media where it is not a debate, because unfortunately, most of the time we bring government officials to explain anything. We put them to a debate, and then the debate goes down to politics more than agenda.
It's watered down.
It's now watered down to just political banter, because now you'll have an opposition parliamentarian who will want to speak about bread and whip emotions, and then we lose the cradle, the real element inside this issue. So the participation in terms of just them making people understand, I think it is something government should really prioritize, that we can be able to have a time where we are just able, I like what happened yesterday, and when the Minister of Health was just explaining on JKL, and the minister got time to explain exactly what this SHIF is. And you could feel that the country is having a better understanding than when it was just the banter of the politics. So I think we need to look at such a scenario where every time we have the finance bill, the first thing that should happen is that the Treasury, together with the Parliament, people responsible for this, should come out first and tell us what it is, article by article, agenda to agenda. Let us understand. After we understand, let us then participate. Otherwise, most of the time we're having public participation, but the public did not understand. So why are they participating?
And the other thing, of course, this public participation is very good, and it's you see, when you look at what in electoral systems they do what they call the civic education.
Yes.
Maybe we need to see a broader perspective of economic education of our people, and I'm very much keen on specifically making people see the opportunities that exist, because every government comes up with these fiscal policies to create opportunities also, especially for those who are interested in business and expanding the national cake. So the economic education that is driven by Treasury will be very important. Of course, the other flip side of it is that, and this is something that is very common for decision makers, they will not want an educated
Mass.
Because then that gives them problems in terms of having these things pass. So somehow this confusion that comes with missing, either misinformation
or disinformation
or just ignorance is also very important for the public policy makers in ensuring that their policies go through. So that's the other side.
All right. Again, we are seeing secondary schools to lose 20 billion thanks to CBC. And the Daily Nation says JSS tutors sacked 2 days after calling off strike. This is quite interesting. And we have seen the education sector suffer some of these losses, because capitation fund, the schools are crying that if money is not released, then they might have to close school early. They can no longer sustain students in school without that capitation fund. But the ministry, on the other hand, is saying that we will release the money. The question now is when, because we saw the students go to school late. The floods had ravaged some of the schools. It was not safe for students to travel. And so they went to school late. And then here we are being told that hakuna chakula, and so we might close early. What does this mean for education system? Because it's been one issue again in education after the other, just like health. JSS teachers, when they finally went to school, they threatened to strike. And they said they are going to the streets. TSC said, if you go, we will sack you. But there was some conversation that happened, and so they were told that the money will be increased. But now here we are seeing JSS tutors sacked 2 days after calling off strike. I mean, again, what games are we playing? Churchill, help us with our education system.
I think this is one area that it will be very important for maybe government to really think deeper, because the public education, or the education in the public sector is one thing that people feel, and the impact of the free primary, secondary, and even partially university education is really directly affected by the people. And the moment you touch anything like the Edu Afia, you touch anything like feeding the children, you touch anything like the tuition fees that is subsidized, people will feel it. And it will, by ripples, have an effect in terms of how people perceive the government of the day. So it's very important to really, just the same way the level of sanctity that the government will take some of the state agencies like the military, also take education sector that serious. Remember that this is one of the sectors that actually consume a huge percentage of the national budget. And And when you look, for example, there has been discussions around, for example, the new funding model of the university. There has been, which somehow, to some extent, if you ask stakeholders, they'll still really question, its impact in terms of how it is reducing the costs for the normal university student, and so it's just important for the government to ensure that they provide these capitations in advance, and and in the right manner, because one thing that we strongly believe in, and if we are not careful, we might lose huge. The education of a country is very important for the health of our people, because if you remember, during the Kibaki era, they came up with the 100% transition, which I think is one of the things that even the regime or the previous regime were really trying to suffer from managing, because it brought in a lot of expenditure. You have so many people transiting from different levels, and you have to cater for them. But the government has to cater for them in terms of the full tuition fee. It's not something that is easy. But I think that with stronger emphasis and with good development partners working together, it is possible for the government to ensure that those subsidies are still in place. If that does not happen, the dangers are we are likely to get back before we got to the transition, the 100% transition, where you will have many people dropping out of school at different levels. And even at the tertiary institutions, you will have many people not being able to pay for their fees. And the result of that, it's one thing that the country does not want to see. You will have huge masses of people who you can't manage, because yes, they might be not knowledgeable, but you better have knowledgeable population who at least understand English, or understand some aspects
public
of
participation,
understand
like
some
advice and
aspects of the budget. So for me, I think this is something that the Ministry of Education and the government should take very, very seriously.
All right. Advice.
Yeah. First of all, our education is very key and very integral for this republic. And we have been able to actually even prove that because of our education, most of the Kenyans are very marketable outside this country. Everywhere Kenyans go, they are performing very well because of the education system. So we cannot be able to start tampering with anything about our education system. And I have a lot to really say about the education system. For instance, these funds that we have at the education level, it's my opinion that all funds, first of all, need to be harmonized. I have never understood, Towett, why we have CDF that is out there to go help
bursaries.
The bursaries.
Yes.
So we have bursaries in the CDF. We have bursaries that are being provided by the governor. We have bursaries at the Ministry of Education. We have bursaries at the Office of the Deputy President. We have bursaries at the Presidency. I wonder, why can't we just harmonize all these bursaries and then make education free, so that everyone is able to go to school? Why are we getting money, then distributing it to politicians for them to start redistributing it
the access,
to children?
The problem with that is access is dependent on
exactly
who I know.
Exactly. So then we have one child who has good access, who is able to benefit from all of them bursaries, and then we have another child who has zero access, who is benefiting from none of them, and yet that is the child that requires it the most. And then when you put together all these bursaries that we have in this country, you might discover that they are even higher than the budget we need to run education. So maybe we just need to harmonize all of them and make education affordable for everybody. Instead of, I don't understand why we collect money, then redistribute it to politicians to distribute to our kids. I don't see the sense in that. So first of all, I think we just need to harmonize that. And then the aspect of now the people providing service. Strikes are provisions of our constitution. We can't be able to strike, we can be able to petition, but then the formula of doing it, in my view, with all respect, is that in Kenya we have started misusing some of our rights, where we now use some of these things for political expediency. that when someone wants to run for office, you first of all become a union leader, then you look for publicity, you put the country just in unnecessary turmoil. And sometimes it's not necessarily about the interests of the people you are actually fighting for. So we are starting to create a precedent where everybody who is disgruntled about anything, you cause a strike. Now, if we are going to go that direction, then at one point, we will not have any service in the country because everyone will be on strike. And everyone wants to make demands that sometimes are extremely bizarre. So in as much as the strikes are very legal and we are supposed to, it's our constitutional right, we also need to relook our motives for the strike and our honesty about the agenda of the people. Because, for instance, these JSS teachers, I fully agree that they need to be remunerated well. I fully agree that what they are fighting for is legit. But some of them you discover are interns.
So we are back to the interns issue. It was the doctors, now the JSS teachers.
So then you wonder, why would interns go on strike? Because I think by law of anyone, interns do not, when you are an intern, you are an intern. And that was the same, I stood the same ground even with the doctors. Because for me, you are an intern, you are an intern. We cannot be able to say the same way we're explaining the doctors and saying, you see, they are qualified. And that means they are doctors. But that is the whole essence of internship. You go for internship after qualification. Even the intern teachers are qualified. Even intern journalists are qualified. So we are sensationalizing professional work in this country, where now we don't want to bargain from a place that is sensible. We just want to whip emotions, and that is it. So I think the aspect of the teachers needs to be looked at, but even the teachers need to look at their honesty and commitment to duty and work. Right. Some of these schools, Towett, some of these principals who are always complaining about money are some of the richest people we have in this country.
So we are funding their lifestyles.
Yeah, so we must also be able to get to a place where let us audit.
The teachers are rich.
Yeah, some of them, I said principals. Yeah, I did not say them. I said the principals. Because, the principal is the AIA holder.
Yes.
He's the chief accounting person of the institution. Yes. Some of these schools are in the slums, but when you look at the head teacher,
their lives do not match.
Their life, I'm not saying they must be able to match, but I'm just saying the relation is very far. So we must be able to have a place where let us also audit and say the money that goes to schools, how exactly is it used? Because nobody's asking these questions. Nobody wants to understand exactly these monies, the farms in the schools. And we went to school, all of us, Towett, and all of us went to school in the same generation. And we were taken to school farms to harvest mahindi for the principal on the school farm.
Yes. And carry firewood.
And
water.
And the school farms were used to do agriculture for the school head.
Yes.
So those are also things we need to really look at. We are not just supposed to look at.
We need to be honest.
We need to be very honest with our conversations as a country so that we're just not looking at the principals are only coming out when they need the money. But they're not also coming out to tell us how they use the money.
Exactly.
So it must be a holistic conversation.
And I agree. And I like that. There's something that has been a very big issue, even for the previous regime. It was partially for them. They were claiming that they're trying to fund part of what government is not funding, but it was hurting Kenyans. Some of the additional fees that were being imposed on parents. They will call them motivational fees. I don't know what they call. I don't know. There's so many funny fees that are included there.
Detrimental.
Exactly, and it inflates the overall fees to the parent to an extent that and some of these things were actually deterred by the national government. So I think as we talk about the whole concept of accountability and then even wanting money, yes, we advocate for government to give them the money in good time as required, but it's also important for them to see how good they use this money in a manner that they don't impose additional fees to the parent.
Right.
And partly, just as you finish that, it's part of the reason why I think I'm one of the few people who support payment of fee through e-citizen.
Why?
Because schools' fee structure is never the same.
It varies
as what the parent pays. I have paid school fees for some of my siblings, and you have a fee structure that reads 25,000. But when you go to the school, you are paying about 40,000.
So there is some hidden fees.
There are hidden fees that are somewhere there. So if they really want to have these fees, then let them be very official. Because these are the things the school does not want to come out and say. So government is busy operating with a school knowing that that school children are paying 25,000.
Yet.
But the children are actually paying 40,000. So if this can be going to a centralized system, then we'll be able, that some of that pilferage will not be able to occur. There will now be transparency because you are not going to be able to ask for 40,000 through eCitizen unless you are going to now make it official.
Or surrender the deficit to government.
So for me, I'm one of the very few people who think, because I think it will be able to curb some of those pitfalls that are already there.
All right. So again, on the Daily Nation, the headline, where is Uhuru's 1.1 billion funding? And I don't know why when we say that, these gentlemen are laughing. Advice and Churchill, what do you know that I don't know?
He's gone full blown.
Former President Uhuru Kenyatta yesterday demanded to know the whereabouts of funds allocated to his office in the past 2 financial years, even as he accused State House of frustrating him and his family from accessing their constitutionally sanctioned benefits in ongoing feud with his successor. So we are seeing 2 financial years. We will not touch on that because it has been touched on by the gentleman. The Star says Ruto Gachagua Rao, allies in big dilemma. Most believed to side with president, but insiders say Gashagua's backers favored by voters. Quite interesting. Hot potato that no one wants to comment on, and public takes sides, fearing reprisal. Advice.
Yeah.
You told me last time that Jubilee supports government. Jubilee are not in government.
Yes.
So as a supporter of government,
yes,
1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling seems to be the narrative that is bringing divide in the KK government, as reported by sections of the media, because none of them is coming out to say that there is a problem. We have seen the president's men hit at Gachagua. Yeah. We have also seen his men hit back, and himself mostly, because Gachagua does not hold back. And he has called out some of the president's men to say, look, you need to operate with some form of decorum.
I think for me, a complaint only becomes a complaint when it's put down. For instance, like what happened with the office of the 4th president, we can be able to discuss that because he came out and said his office has not been funded.
And showed track record of the letters.
Yeah. So, but when it comes to this issue of the president and his deputy, I will still insist that it's the opinion of the media, and it's also just banter between people. You know, when you are in high office, your lieutenants must look for something to defend you about. So if there is nothing to defend you about, they create a problem and start solving, so that they must be able to look like one is more.
They are working.
One is more loyal than the other. So for me, it's just pure politics, because I haven't seen the president speak to it. I haven't seen the deputy directly accuse the president of anything. He has talked about members of parliament, and I don't understand why leaders who are elected in their right are called president's men, deputy president's men. I think those are MPs of whatever the constituency, and they hold their own positions, so they should be able to be referred to as such. I don't know where they become president's men. So for me, it's basically just, in my view, a media conversation, and it's a problem that is being created by people around the bosses who also want to look like they have something to offer. There's some work that they're doing. Because I haven't up to now seen any sidelining of the deputy president on anything. Because just, was it yesterday, I saw him chairing IBEC as usual. Yeah, I have seen him still chair the departmental committees of it's called interministerial committees or something. I have seen him on duty as always. He was given a clear mandate that was gazetted to deal with matters the counties, matters coffee. I haven't seen any regazettement of that. So that essentially means that the deputy president is in office. So I don't understand where all these...
where was the issue of the... I think it began from that issue of the helicopter, the military one.
Yeah.
And it was said that there was a request that was made and denied.
Yes.
I think most of the issues stemmed from there.
Yeah, and I think I don't understand why the issues stemmed from there, because the issue was very complete. They say the military helicopter was requested. And the people who are supposed to give it were able to give a statement, and they said the helicopters are on maintenance and whatever. And I thought that is something Kenyans should be happy about, especially since we just had a very unfortunate incident
with a former CDF.
With our former CDF. So when a military plane is said to be under maintenance, I think that should be a good thing. And two, it is not the provision, it's not a right of any deputy president to use military helicopter. Military helicopter is under the
Defense Ministry.
Yeah, is under defense and is under the commander in chief,
which is the president.
Who is the president? So it's. By the way, try to remember yourself. I did not remember seeing President William Ruto then as deputy
use military
any
choppers.
military chopper to any function. So I think sometimes you can be given undue privilege. Like we can come to the tackle Churchill, and the way Towett does it very well, she will provide breakfast. Then with the time we think it's all right.
Churchill. That is not the case, but
Yes.
People Daily, Business Daily says, pending bills nightmare as state allocates zero budget, and pending bills has been a big issue.
Mm-hmm.
We even saw the president talk about it, and we have seen cries, especially from the counties. The counties are the biggest, are causing the biggest nightmare, especially to contractors, to suppliers, to who. Pending bills, we have people who've never been paid since inception of county governments. And that makes me wonder, 10 years down the line.
And that's very disastrous for the economy. Because,
it is.
Because remember that government is one of the main suppliers, and it's one of the places where most suppliers expect to get their business. And today you will talk to a typical entrepreneur who supplies or either services or goods. She will tell you that it's no longer very luxurious to get an LPO from a government or any saga, because of the delay that will come to payment. And most of these people, you use your money, and when you have used your money, when the payments are delayed, then it's like dead capital. So I think that as part of accelerating business and creating good business environment for our entrepreneurs, it's very important for these bills to be paid in urgency and to be paid as fast as possible, so that it makes doing business with government more attractive, not just for our local business people, but also internationally. I mean, it will not augur well if an international multinational corporation wants to engage with government, and the first perception they have is that you'll not get your payments as early as you as you will want it. So, and I think that this is something that we have said it over and over and over again. And it's incumbent. At some point, I think there was an acceleration that happened, but I don't know what happened somehow.
Ikakwama
tena. It's important for maybe as part of creating good business environment for counties, for the national government, and even all the other state agencies, to ensure that they create liquidity in the country by ensuring they pay some of these bills.
I remember when the counties had just come in, and there was helter-skelter to supply to counties. And do you remember people, youth access to government procurement opportunities?
Yes.
To date,
something.
kuna watu waliokshoniwa because they took the LPO to some of these financial institutions. They were given the money to do the job. To date, the counties have not paid. Who do you think the bank went for? And that is how the young people who had seen themselves as would-be millionaires left that business and never to go back again. The business of tenderpreneurship is not for the faint-hearted.
It's not jokes.
And the business for tenderpreneurship. Now, what that has done, it has made it, one, very expensive to access those tenders, and two, it has made it almost like a thing for a few. So advice na wenzake, because you people have the money, the muscle to do these businesses and not necessarily affect your your financial status. You know,
And
there's
over-
someone who goes to borrow to do this job so that if they are paid on time, they remit what they owe and remain with that small profit.
And over and above that, it also makes some of these people to provide very pure services.
Yes,
Because
shoddy
you
and
see,
substandard
exactly,
work.
by the time that you're giving this service, it's either the time has elapsed or you have overused your money that you just
You have
don't know
nothing
what.
left.
You just want to
Yeah.
complete this work
Yeah.
and complete it shortly.
Yeah, and yes, advice.
I think for me, about these pending bills, first of all, it's unfortunate because when you stifle business operations, the economy subsequently is stifled.
take a hit.
Because these companies that you are owing money have employees. Those employees lose their jobs. Those employees are families. And so, those companies pay taxes.
The ripple effect.
So the ripple effect is quite massive. And one of the biggest problems I have with pending bills, and I think this would be one of the reasons why, because when the president came in, he pushed to have all pending bills sorted, then we saw it slow down at some point. Because again, unfortunately, as a country, you get to the realization that yes, you're pushing for pending bills to be paid, but maybe half of those pending bills are actually works not done. And maybe we have others that are companies that have not even received the work in the first place. So it's a ghost thing. And I think that's why even now, the president now had to go slow and now look for how can we be able to audit these. So
Sort out the real bills.
Exactly. So for me, the only way to deal with these pending bills in the first place, we must work backwards. Because there is no way you are supposed to be giving works for monies not budgeted, for monies not allocated. Because you can only ask for the supply of a pen when you have money to buy the pen. But most of what happens in counties is that because the governor is also looking for political expediency and he knows Churchill is quite an influential guy and is disturbing him in the office every now and then, he's told, you know what, Churchill, you supply the doors. And yet he doesn't have a budget for it. Yeah? And yet, because he knows I have about a year left, all I need is proof that I am working with Churchill, then Churchill will help me get re-elected, then he will be dealing with those pending bills.
later. And that is how Churchill anakwama.
Yeah, exactly. So the problem is we are using it also for just for the politics because we must work backwards. Let counties not give work for any LPOs.
LPOs to work not done or even budgeted for.
They cannot give. They shouldn't give an LPO when they have no budget in the first place. And then number two, counties should be professionalized. I can assure you, Towett, most of the problem we're having even with our county governments is because of just lack of professionalism. When we come to the national government, there are structures. You have the EACC, you have budget,
Public
you
service
have public
commission.
service, you have a lot of structure. Most of operations in county governments are very clandestine. You'll go to a county government and from the reception, you meet the mother of unprofessionalism. You'll go to the reception and find people making their hair.
Talking in
You
mother
go-
tongue.
Yeah, people are just speaking in mother tongue on the reception of the county government. Everyone in the county government, the biggest job is who is accompanying the governor. Yeah,
To where?
to where everyone is about and who is opening the door of the governor. So even the professionalism in the counties is extremely wanting, and that's why service delivery cannot get to a certain level. Because most of the people who have been given the jobs in the counties, it's not because they have the wherewithal to do the job, but it's just because they were in the right political camp. And you see, that has been able to be solved at the national level.
Yes.
Because at the national level, you will go and elect the president and whatever, but see, we have normal civil servants who
That it does not
who it
affect
does not
your
affect.
operations,
They are
yeah.
able to at least continue the operations of government as should be. But at county level, there are a lot of messes. You just get somebody in office, he does not have an understanding of anything. And because communication is my profession, I always use it as an example because it's the worst hit by county governments, where most counties think a director of communication is anyone who can post on Facebook
And take photos.
and take photos. Then you just get someone who is now called a director of communication. So it is clandestine in the way that the counties are being run. And three, the powers of the governor, in my view, even constitutionally, as a country, we need to look and ask ourselves, did we allocate the right powers to the governor? Because the governor is a political leader, he is the AIA holder of the county. Like, basically, the county revolves around the governor.
A demigod. in
It's
the
a
county.
demigod. And that's why one human being can decide tomorrow morning and say he doesn't need the deputy. And some have gone to extreme levels where you see the deputy doesn't have an office.
Yes.
Yeah, it has not degenerated to that level at national level. It's not possible. You cannot get to that level. But in county governments, I know of counties where deputy governors do not have offices, leave alone cars.
That's a whole other story.
That's a whole other story. The deputy can simply not have a place to sit.
And they are expected to do some duties.
Exactly. So that is how bad, sometimes even now in the way we have structured our law around the county governments, the power of the governor is something I think we need to look at and ask ourselves, does a governor need a deputy in the first place? Yeah, so that we are able to solve some of these problems. Because for as long as we have that kind of working environment, the pending bills will continue being there. Because nobody is really, and yet as pending bills continue being there, trust me, we have people who are given work in the morning and they are paid in the afternoon.
Yes.
For works like opening Facebook accounts. You remember there was a controversy at some point about a county that had allocated about 6-point-something million
to open a Facebook
to opening
account.
social media handles.
Oh, man.
So you look at those kind of things, and then in as much as we are using the larger word pending bills, we need to audit and see which bills exactly are
pending
at county government
against the budget and against the allocation.
Against the budget, against the allocation, and that is how it should be. And the Auditor General must be able to work with better speed, because sometimes I feel the Auditor General only makes us emotional, but we don't have solutions. Because every time we have a report from the Auditor General, it is about a government that was there, and it's about they're giving you a report about Nairobi.
In 2013
but it's Nairobi in
2017.
2014. So you wonder, okay, so what are we supposed to do with that information?
Speaking of Auditor General, you will even now utakasirika zaidi. Same Business Daily says Auditor flags ADC's puzzling 500 Kenya shillings per acre land lease. So this is the agricultural development advice. Yes, I am reading what you had me read. 500 per acre. That was leased out. And this also came up in the Daily Nation, inside ADC's 500 shillings per acre lease, land lease scam. So the Agricultural Development Corporation leased land to an unnamed investor at more than 10 times below the market rate. So this is not even above the market rate. So Kenya shillings 500 an acre annually, underlining the blatant abuse of government property in dealings with business people. And this is not the only one. I think sometime last week there was the issue of Moi University, where some part of the land was leased. Moi University is a public land, and the VC had been called to the Committee of Education in Parliament that is chaired by Jack Wamboka. And as he was talking there, the committee could tell that he was being evasive and very minimal with the truth. Some committee members walked out because they said you cannot sit here and blatantly lie to a whole committee of education when you're put to task about some of these issues. So it was almost a similar issue where it was an unnamed and unknown investor who leased the land at, again, below market rate.
This is just crazy too. Some of these things and
500 shillings.
500
Can you imagine?
Where is that? I need to be the investor.
It's actually airtime an acre.
Where is it?
Just airtime, because 500 shillings like just some airtime.
Yeah.
And
for an acre, and it's for a whole year.
Yes.
It's not for a day, it's for a whole year. And now, how you look at how simplistic our issues are, and how as a country sometimes we're not serious with the real issues. You look at that is a very glaring story. But
and it
is on Business Daily somewhere below there.
That you can easily miss it.
It is something you will easily miss. I can assure you had looked at
even the Daily Nation one.
Yeah. So it is, most of our headlines are purely political. And that's why I keep imploring about the media and saying, because the media is very strong and the media shapes the narrative. Why can't the media ensure that our narratives are shaped on agenda? So that today, something like this would be the headline and not just the respect me and all these things that we are able to see, so that we can have real conversations. And then you look at, I'm yet to read the full story, but then I would ask myself, when was this done? You would realize the Auditor General is giving us very good news very late.
At the wrong time.
Yeah, maybe that land has already been leased for almost 7 years. The people who have already done, the damage is already done.
You can't even follow up.
You can't
the
follow
track record itself is
Exactly. So even if we say now we follow the wheels of justice, okay, fine, you can want to follow the wheels of justice, make an arrest here and there, but the damage was already done. So for me, it's more about we should be able to be preventive more than curative. We should ensure that the wrong thing doesn't happen. That's how it should be. Like when the budget is happening in Parliament, we should be able to look at the budget vis-a-vis what has every county been able to ask for.
Yeah.
So that what they have asked for in the beginning, the ones that are useless, we can be able to flag it off from that point. But when we wait until the damage is done, then 10 years later, we now come and say, you see, this land was leased at 500 shillings. And I don't know.
And the other thing that, these ADC lands are very huge.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're very huge chunks of land. And I think that when you look at how how they have been distributed across the country, you'll find most of them were in between some of the most volatile areas.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that perhaps it's also important for the public and government to consider making good use of these lands. When you see what used to happen previously, during, I think, mostly during the Moi regime, you used to find these land were actually having some agricultural products in them. It could be either sugarcane or it could be maize or something like that. Yeah. Because then it becomes productive. But the moment we leave them to be idle, trust you me, this is Kenya.
It attracts.
It will attract the attention, and that attention is what people will see, the opportunities and I think those are some of the things that are now emerging out of this. I see this, what they're mentioning here, this is in Laikipia.
Because in Laikipia, again, it is ADC Mutara farm.
Yes.
This farm has always had issues.
Exactly.
I remember in 2016, 2017, just before the election, there were some serious clashes in Laikipia because I was in Laikipia then. Yes. Yeah. Between the Samburu, the Maasai, the Kalenjin community there. Yes. Because when there's drought in Laikipia, at those days, ADC would allow them to graze their animals within the ADC Mutara farm, and then they had an agreement of how much you pay per cow that comes in. But a part of it, a huge chunk of it was grabbed by a private investor then. And so this investor, of course, by design would not allow the farmers to come in na walishe ng'ombe yao. You want to tell me a Samburu man, Maasai or Kalenjin man will watch their animal die, yet they can see grass growing there. My friend, it was drama and chaos personified. So until, the community was brought to have a sit down, and they had legitimate claims to ask, how is it that you can deny us? We're even willing to pay.
Yes.
But why would you deny us and watch our animals die? Yet we can see
the grass.
Yes.
And I don't know why we call thieves by very nice names. Towett is saying that the land was
grabbed
by a private investor.
By a thief. It was grabbed by a thief.
I clarify my words. The land was grabbed by a thief. This is ADC Mutara farm. It has always had issues.
Yeah, because land grabbing, we must run away from this culture of when the sin is big, the sinner is sanctified by being given a very nice name.
A private investor.
Yeah, called private investor. We even call it, we have very fancy names for very bad things in this country, just because the people who do them, because they belong to the
certain class.
Yeah, a certain class. So their names, they're not called thieves. It's not called stealing. It's called embezzlement of funds, and all those kind of things. So for me, it's about such kind of things are things we must be able to run away from. But then we must do it from the beginning, so that we are not. Most of the time, we are talking about things that have already happened, and it's way long after that.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at the like what we're talking about, the ADC farms and the people who are there. First of all, I wouldn't understand why, first of all, even they have to pay. Because see, these are government, if it's government land, and these are the main business of government should be for the people.
Exactly.
That's the main business of the government. It should make people's lives easier. So when government land is where people can be able to access and the animals will be able to be healthy, first of all, we're dealing with a food production problem. We are ensuring that the country is food secure. So that is how we should be able to look at it. Government is not in the business of profiting. Yeah. But then sometimes, I've always said that government is a very big animal. And sometimes you have, and I have a lot of belief that this country today, the president of this country, when you look at least his body language, his resolve, his hands-on approach to issues, I feel like he is very serious about having very many solutions to this country. But he has very few hands to help him across because the government is already so huge. Because on one end, you are busy handling pending bills, issues and ensuring people are paid. There's another one who is leasing government land at 500 shillings.
There's another one who is hiding the wage bill.
Who is hiding the wage bill. There's another one who is just... it's crazy. So sometimes we must look at our problems and our solutions must come... I will say we must work backward. I think we must start by, first of all, even getting the right people in office.
Yes. And we need to be timely.
Yeah.
Because you see, this one we are talking about 2019...
Look at that.
And also, even when you look at the report, it's mentioning an unnamed tenant. So it means even as it now, we actually do not know this person.
It is what advice is saying.
Yeah.
We most likely know the person.
But we don't, we
because of who they are.
Yeah.
And maybe the office they hold currently.
Yeah.
You cannot dare say it is advice Mundalo.
Yeah, because then the conversation shifts from the sin that has been committed
to advice is being targeted.
To defamation. So we go to court then over defamation and spend 6 years dealing with their defamation case and not the real issue.
All right.
So I think some of these things actually need to be canvassed, and I think that's why maybe at a later time we need to really have a conversation also about our court processes, our justice system, because sometimes I also think it's part of the problem.
Justice delayed is justice denied.
It's justice denied.
All right, so that closes our discussion today on our newspapers and the reviews and just what is going on in the country, because like we agreed as we were starting this segment, Kenya has a lot of things going on. You might go to sleep, everything was peaceful, and you left everything working okay, and wake up to chaos. Yeah. And it is our country as it is. We cannot have any other. We have to work and make it work also. If you're joining us this morning, do not worry. We have not gone far in our discussion. In fact, we are just about to begin discussing the topic of the day. So expectations of, what are our expectations in this budget that is about to be read, I think on Thursday, that is 13th of June. And we would also like to hear from you, our viewers. What are your expectations as this budget is being read? Also, what are your thoughts on the finance bill? Because it will also inform how we are going to raise money to fund this budget that will be 2024-2025 come 1st July. And Churchill, kick us off. What are some of your expectations this coming financial year, given everything that has been raised and all the concerns in the Finance Bill 2024?
I think for the first thing is that of course there are a couple of other things that we'll expect to have increased, like what has been sensationally and highly discussed on the fuel circulation. And the fuel circulation has it's something that I think that in as much as it has an implication in terms of macroeconomics, there are also other global issues around it, especially in terms of being part and parcel of the conversation of the climate change. That I think those are some of the things that may have informed these decisions. The other things that I would like maybe to highlight, which are also other aspects of this bill, is there are exemptions. Those that are related with either excise for those who might be interested in manufacturing of vehicles. I think previously there was the mention in the previous budget on the tax exemption for car manufacturers, but there were concerns around to what extent, because you find that most of the people who are purportedly doing manufacturing in Kenya and sort of doing assembly. So the clarity around that, this finance bill sort of clarifies and mentions about 30% of that are those who, the car manufacturers must be able to get about 30% of their parts locally manufactured. So you don't import.
And then it just doesn't become assembly.
Yes,
manufacturing.
Yes, about you can import around 70% of the parts, but then the other remainders you make them, and there are companies in Kenya that have that capacity. So I think that is very positive in terms of just accelerating a foreign direct investment into a country for purposes of manufacturing in the car industry. And that, I think, will be a huge advantage for the companies that will be interested in manufacturing, especially in the e-mobilities, the electric cars, which is also a huge opportunity now that is going to emerge out of this. So, so there is also the incentives, the incentivization of the electric cars that is also huge for those who are going to get into this space. The other things around the increase of taxes in some other segments, like in we would mention in digital tax, those who are into marketing, you have marketing platforms you'll need to pay. I think that's part of extending the tax base, because you're doing business, you got to pay tax for it. So I think that ideally is positive, because in as much as it might face resistance in terms of those who are within the digital, or what we will call the e-commerce space, resisting it, it is positive because it creates a fair level playing field. Remember that if I am selling shoes in a shop, and someone else is not having a shop but selling it in some sort of an e-commerce platform, the other person is not paying any fee, but
terms
I'm
of
paying
taxes.
in form of taxes. But me, who has got a physical shop, I'm paying some taxes. What will you expect? Everybody will shift. The macroeconomic effect will be everybody will shift into the digital platform. And so you'll find business people going to hide their goods and selling them digitally.
All right.
so
Na unajua Kenya wakosangi ujanja.
So the other thing, as I finalize this, is that and these I've mentioned elsewhere, that in as much as government seeks to expand its tax base to meet its recurrent expenditure, the balance and especially the cry of the people needs to be listened to, because as we have mentioned, is that people will always find ways of surviving. And one of the things, when I'm back in my science world, I always say that water or any fluid always seek its equilibrium.
Yes.
And that equilibrium, it will always fight for it at any given point, irrespective. And even the citizens will always want to seek equilibrium of what will work best for them in terms of them being able to sustain their business, being able to sustain their economic status, including finding ways of escaping taxation. So you might realize that you extend the tax base, but end up realizing that you're actually reducing the amount of money that you can get from the people.
Advice.
Yeah.
I can see advice. Your handwriting is very beautiful.
Yeah. It's
Let us know what it is you think.
My heart as well.
Advice. I was not ready. You have said your heart as well.
My
but
heart as well.
What are your expectations of this 2024-2025 budget? And it's reading in the next few days. What are you hoping to see? What are some of the issues you're hoping to see addressed in this budget?
Yeah, and some of the issues I'm looking at, and I'm very optimistic that this government will address, are, for instance, number one, the matter of food security. For me, it was quite a very good plan by government in the previous budget when they were able to budget for production. And I'm hoping that does not go away, so that we are able to invest in our food security, that the farmers out there must be able to be budgeted for, so that we must have subsidized fertilizer, subsidized farm inputs, so that the way we are able to produce our food in this country needs to become cheaper on the side of the farmer, so that government takes the bigger chunk of the process, so that at the end of the day, we are food secure. The subsidization of fertilizer alone last year was able to actually almost triple the production of the maize that this country was able to have. So if we can be able to move towards more of that, where we are budgeting for food security and just ensuring that production is easier, importation or even the farm inputs needs to be made easier. So that's one of the things I'm looking at. I'm also looking at the budget on education, and I'm very particular about the CBC curriculum. I'm hoping that government is now able to budget to make it now to strike an equilibrium within this CBC, because I've always said the CBC curriculum, in as much as it is a good curriculum, the problem is that it is not on equilibrium, because what the kids are being told to do in Nairobi is not the same thing that the kids are being told to do in Naitiri. And if children are learning by observation, then I ask myself, how will kids in the village become pilots because they have not observed planes? And the kids in Nairobi have that advantage. Yeah, we are looking at some of the kids cannot even afford the little things they're told to go and come with whatever for the making of whatever. So I'm hoping that this budget will be able to address that problem and provide some of these things required by the CBC curriculum directly to schools, as opposed to making them subjective to the children, because the children have the varied means of livelihoods. I'm also looking at the aspect of the budget funding climate action, because most of the time we have had climate conversations, but we are doing more or less very little about it. Yeah, so all of us are aware of the climate change and the position of Africa as it is on matters climate. But then what are the tangible things that we are doing about it? The president has the project of 1 billion trees. That is just one thing. What about the other elements? And are we also educating people enough about this climate action? So I'm also looking at this budget being able to fund some of the climate-oriented action so that we prepare for a better future. I'm also looking at the budget, looking at youth employability, because every aspect, the most of the people in this country that are unemployed are young people. So this budget must employ people. We are looking at the number of teachers that should be employed should go higher. The number of the police officers that should be employed should go higher. The number of people even in the NYS, the number of people at the KWS, every element and every place where young people can actually get employment should be heavily funded, so that the employability of young people goes to the next nexus, instead of us complaining about the unemployment problem every time. Of course, it cannot be done in one budget, but I'm just looking at, can it be able to move even higher? And on the same element of youth employability, I'm also looking at innovation, so that government can be able to support innovation. Because we have looked at, you remember during the COVID time, there is what Kenyatta University students were able to do. They came up with...
Yes.
About the seat or something.
Yeah, and there was actually several elements, because there was what the university came up with. We had guys who came up with beds somewhere, I think it was somewhere in Nyeri or somewhere, I cannot remember exactly where. But we were able to see...
the two students who made a bed, yes.
Exactly.
Kirinyaga.
It was in Kirinyaga. So these were able to come up with that. We have also formerly been able to see someone make a car in Kenya.
Laikipia.
Now, in
Yes.
Laikipia. So we are looking at a situation where...
And a plane.
Even a plane has actually been made in this country. So that shows you our potential in innovation, our potential in creation, our potential to just be able to do some of these things. But then they have never been. That's why those stories come as sensational headlines. They become fun stories, and then that dies. But then you look at, if they were able to be budgeted for within the budget to be able to support some of these things, then there's a lot that we can actually do. Our own students in this country were able to provide COVID solutions.
Yes.
So if we can be able to fund these without a crisis, we fund the innovation without the crisis, so that we're not waiting until there is a crisis for us to then be able to help on that. Also, the element of, I don't know whether that would still fall under innovation, but I have seen the writing culture in Kenya come up. The young people of this country today,
Yes.
they have come up. The writing culture is now very high. I have seen people like Jacob Aliet, and I can see even his books here. I have
Deborah
seen
Auko.
people like Nyanchwari. I have seen
Deborah Auko.
Deborah Auko. You haven't even seen Duale and his book. So we have a lot of writing happening in Kenya today that was not previously being done. So there must be a way that this can be able to be supported. And I'm hoping that that can be part and parcel of the budget. Last but not least, I'm looking at the element of health. With the shift to SHIF. Today, many people are complaining about NHIF not being able to cover some of the things, Like you go to hospital, you're told, the money has not been remitted and such kind of things. So can this budget fully fund this health segment so that when we are doing this transfer to SHIF, we are not again faced by the similar problems
we had in
NHIF, where the hospitals will continue telling Kenyans that, okay, this is okay, you are actually guaranteed this, but the problem is the government has not been able to remit, the government has not been able to do that. So I'm looking at let them also just fund health effectively. And there is, someone removed tea from government offices. And in my view, I tend to think this budget should return civil servants because
Mundalo for civil service.
I don't agree with the aspect of punishing employees in the guise of cutting costs.
Yet it's just,
the clerk and the secretary in the office just take tea. When money gets lost, it did not pass through their hands.
They have nothing
to do with how money gets lost. So we cannot punish the common civil servant just because of to curb some embezzlement. Let us deal with corruption loopholes as they are. Let us deal with the cost of the tea. Remember, that person does not even procure the tea. So if the tea is expensive, the problem is not the taker. The problem is the person procuring it. So let us also protect the interests of civil servants, because it is not in their lives being made harder that Kenyans' lives become easier.
No.
Because these civil servants are serving Kenyans. And they are our sisters, they are our brothers. So
they
are our parents. The more their lives are made easier, the better they even serve Kenyans. Some of these mood swings we see in government offices can just be rescued by tea. So I think this budget should also be able to do that. And lastly, I think they will not budget for corruption. Thank you.
We hope so. We hope so, because we've seen in this country what we call legislated corruption.
Sure.
So we hope that this time around we will not even have corruption being budgeted for and even devolved to the counties, because apart from being budgeted, we devolve it. And Churchill, I mean, it is the grim reality of how we use our money, because some section of Kenyans have come out to say the problem is not even in raising the taxes. The problem is not even in the collection. It is in the use. And how we see it being used, and the pilferage. So we will see people live very luxurious lives, even that aside. But when you hear the money that is lost, especially in the counties, it breaks your heart. For someone to be taken by EACC and you're hearing they stole 3 billion, 2 billion. Do you know, when you contextualize how much money that could fund a whole ministry.
And that is, I think that is, even when you look at some of the apprehension that is emerging from the people about the raising of the taxation, you will actually, and I agree with what you're saying, it might not necessarily be that people are feeling, people feel that the taxes are too high, but they feel like this is just the same things that have been happening. We're going to pay this, but we're not going to get the services that we want.
The money will be stolen.
Exactly. So I think that that's an area that really needs to be looked at, because the service delivery is very important, because we are paying taxes is like a client who is buying goods or services from a shop or a person.
Value for money.
Value for money. So, I'm paying taxes, give me value for the money. And I'm treated like the client who is paying the due taxes. And I think when we reach that level, then you will find people will pay this. And trust you me, when you look at advanced countries, they pay way more taxes than us.
Yeah. But the systems are working. That's the difference.
The systems are working. They are able to pay that because they get value for their what? Value for their money. So I think one of the things that really needs to be worked on is that value for money. If it is, for example, the shifting of NHIF to SHIF, we need to get value for the money for that. If it is, raising taxes to do something, let people see that this is what is happening. And trust, citizens really watch. In as much as they make a lot of noise, they talk a lot, and they resist things. In their resistance and in their noise making, they are also keenly watching what the government does with their money. And in the long run, they actually come and when Kibaki was doing the superhighway, today people still see of all the other things that the government did at that time, they
They
still
only credit
remember
the superhighway.
they still
Free
remember
education.
the free education. Are you getting me?
Yes.
So at least there should be something that people can spot and say that this government, yes, they raised taxes. We
They did
felt
this.
the raising of the taxes,
But
see, he did this, he did this, he did this, he did. That is the legacy that the leadership can actually be deliberate in making, and you know, that cascaded all through and devolved all through into the counties will be very important. You know, the counties offer very good opportunity to also do some of those legacy projects that would then make, because you see, again, if the national government delivers and the county government does not deliver, people still think the government has not delivered.
Yeah.
because they are both governments.
Yes, exactly. So I think that working together holistically as the two levels of governments, working genuinely for the best interest to achieve certain legacy projects with the raising of the taxes will be very key in making the people see value for their money.
All right. And as we discuss budget here this morning, the budget that we are expecting to be read by the CS Treasury on the floor of the House on the 13th, that is on Thursday, is a budget that is 4 trillion. The highest ever in the country. And we saw KRA, I think, was targeting to raise 2.64 trillion this financial year. They fell short. So I don't know half of this budget, how we are going to fund half of this budget, because now this is where, as Kenyans, we have been told to tighten our belts, because with almost more than half target missed, some of these things that have been raised in the finance bill is what will go now to raise the deficit. But Kenyans are crying, captains of industry are crying, and manufacturers are saying that this heavy burden of taxation on the economy is going to be very difficult in the months coming forward. But also, we have tried to play politics with this issue, and I think this is where now Kenyans wanachoka. Because as they are raising the issues, there's a quarter that will try to explain, like you're saying, this is why we need this money and this is how we are going to get it. But there's also a quarter of politicians. And we saw the chairman of the finance committee in parliament being brought to task. And maybe some KK lieutenants have said that his words were taken out of context. But utterances from our legislatures are also making it difficult for Kenyans to accept some of these issues that are being raised. Whether he said it or not, the issue of manufacturers, if they feel like it is too heavy on them, they should relocate to Zambia and the rest of the countries. You know, the political class is not also helping the government in dealing with this issue. Advice.
Yeah. I think I would lay the problem on the Office of Government Communication, that is government spokesperson, because that is the office that is mandated to make people understand every element of government. And when the people are meant to understand it, it is wholesome, including parliamentarians, because it's a government agenda. And we have seen a lot of those careless statements fly out. Even Kimani said something else also during the
bread issue.
He said something else during the bread issue and such kind of flying statements. So for me, I think, first of all, it's a challenge. The Office of the Government spokesperson, Mwaura, he should be able to actually do something on government communication, because sometimes the whole reason why everything is being out of context is because it was not communicated effectively. So when we are looking at the finance bill, for instance, and we are looking at what needs to be expected, really, as a government that, and most of the time they have told us that this government works in synergy, where even ministers are able to make some declarations that are supposed to belong to another ministry. So in that same element of working in synergy, can they be able to really have an agreement about some things before they actually let them out to the public, and let the formula of communication be specific, that this is exactly what we want and this is how it should be communicated, let the people understand it this way? Because I don't excuse any careless statement from any leader, especially an elected leader. We cannot be able to start running around and saying you are taken out of context and whatever. No, you are an elected leader. You know you have a responsibility.
You need to know better.
You must be able to know better. You must be able, if there is anyone who deals with the common mananchi, it's you, because you looked for votes from them. So you cannot be able to have those kind of careless. And if you do, then you must be able to also come and recant and say, no, I think I made a mistake here. Because again, we learn through our mistakes. You can be able to own it up and say it was a mistake. But in terms of just blatantly saying things and then coming out later and saying it, I was taken out of context, I don't even know why people still use that line, because I think it should be a tired line. It should be a tired line.
You said it, so deal with the
Yeah,
consequences.
just deal with the consequences. Yeah, instead of telling us which context, out of which context. So I think people should just communicate more effectively. And for me, I would put about 70% of the blame on that on those of the government spokesperson.
All right, Churchill.
Yes.
What is your expectation on where the biggest shares of the budget should go to? Because we've seen the issues at the health sector, we've seen issues at the education sector. We are also seeing the emergence of climate change and climate action, and even the digital economy. Those are some of the biggest, I could say, issues right now in the country, both on employability and also just looking to see also food security for the country, you know. So what is your expectation on budget allocations and where the biggest chance should go to? Because we've seen the president say that we are planning to cut our budget by 12%. So is it the budget itself, or is it the spending? Is it the allocations, you know?
I think it's important, perhaps maybe we could look at it from the perspective of the production part and the consumption. Because there are segments of the budget that cannot be, they are long-term productive. They're not immediate productive. It's an investment for making the country productive into the future. And those are things to do with security. There are things to do with and the security could mean the physical security, it could mean food security. And then there is also aspects of education. Those are things that you have to put money into. And I think that the government has to be very deliberate in ensuring they put money into those segments. Of course, health is a little bit, the advantage they have with health is that if they introduce SHIF, then that should be able to help them to, you know, if SHIF goes through, then it will be able to help fund a big part of the health budget. The productive part is where they could think about reducing their expenditures on and trying to look on how they can increase revenues from them. The digital space,
yes.
How can you be able to expand that to ensure you get more money? And I strongly support that. You know, the agricultural space, how can we expand that to ensure that we promote the production for the purposes of giving us immediate revenues? So my thinking is, and even in the recurrent budget expenditures, we also need to do prioritization, because then prioritizing might not necessarily mean cutting the budget, but it just means putting what is urgent and what is important as a priority. So and that also will also help in managing the deficit that is so huge, so that you are able to meet your expenditures or your needs in a way that is possible. The other thing that would perhaps be important for us to consider, is the question of engaging development partners in trying to fund certain aspects of this budget, and cascading that engagement beyond just government, because there are some of the development expenditures that either state agencies could deliberately work with the development partners to help solve. Because remember that we also have development partners in the country who also want to achieve certain interests of their specific countries in Kenya. And so the convergence of those interests then will be able to help us to meet some of the budget deficits that we have in our programming or in some of our development of either infrastructure or something like that. The other thing, of course, which people will not want is the question of debt. Debt is also a part that can be used for meeting that deficit, and that debt could also be local or international. During Kibaki regime, there was a high in, he emphasized the use of local debt. And that then helps the people who are in the financial sector within locally to also feel they're part of doing business with government. So that can also be helpful in making the people also see that, we are not, most Kenyans think that when you are getting debts from other parts of the world, then you are selling Kenya out there. So if you are getting the debt from within, then you are selling Kenya to the people.
Kenya. No, that's a very interesting points raised by Dr. Churchill. But advice.
Yeah.
Our recurrent expenditure vis-a-vis our developmental expenditure, we have also seen it. We have seen it play out in the counties, where the Auditor General gave us a report to say only 4 counties met the threshold for spending money on development and where it was supposed to go. I think it was Kisii, Nakuru, Kwale, I can't remember the other county. You can imagine 4 out of 47 only met that threshold. Yet, money is remitted to counties in huge numbers, but the only thing we see coming out of the counties is the corruption scandals. It is quite disheartening even for Kenyans who diligently pay their taxes and sometimes with a lot of pain, and sacrifices. Now, that aside, how are we going to balance our recurrent and development expenditure? That is one. And we have also seen the president come out to say that this borrowing, international borrowing, we will see the long-term benefits, maybe not now. But for now, how can we ensure that the lives of Kenyans is not very difficult in this budget that we are about to read? Because advice, I can only give what I have.
Yeah.
Hata uniweke hivi upside down unipige. If I don't have, I don't have. So expenditure versus recurrent versus developmental, and what are the effects of our borrowing long term?
I think first of all, it's true that our budget on development is way very low.
Very minimal.
But I disagree that is the problem. Because you can imagine, as low as it is still stolen as high as that.
Can you imagine? So if we were prudent.
If it was to be high and the status quo is to remain, then you can imagine the level of corruption.
Horrible.
Because this pilferage, we already have these pending bills and all these things. And we have all these scandals out of that small allocation. We always say it's out of every 10 shillings, only 2 shillings is going to development. So it's that 2 shillings that is giving us 1 billion scandals. It is that 2 shillings that we are being told someone has pocketed 300 million. It is from that 2 shillings that the corruption is as massive as it is. I would therefore almost argue that 2% is possible to actually develop this country. So all we are supposed to do in the first place is to ensure that we seal corruption loopholes. Corruption is the biggest enemy of this country, not the budget first. So let us first of all seal those corruption loopholes. President Uhuru Kenyatta during his tenure told us that we are losing 2 billion
per day.
You can be able to imagine how much you need
per day.
For instance,
Churchill has removed the calculator.
I'm doing the math.
Yeah. So you can be able to imagine what amount of money you need to fund the entire education system in this country.
It is not even, it is 2 days, but it is 2 days only of
we
corruption.
We just need a very few days of this corruption to be able to actually
read for the people, please.
720 billion in a year. What's our deficit? What's our deficit?
2 point something trillion.
So this is almost half.
Yes, so we need about 4 years.
Yeah.
And we'll be done. So the biggest problem of this country, Towett, is not mostly those figures we mentioned and the percentages. It's a corruption problem. We must be able to seal our corruption loopholes. Look at the amount of money that is allocated to county governments. County governments are always complaining that the money that is supposed to be allocated for them is not enough. But in that money not being enough, look at the lives of governors.
Opulent.
Look at the opulent spending that is there in the county governments. Look at why are people, by the way, I've always wondered, why should people be so hungry for these tenders? It means there's something sinister about them. Because if people are to make normal profits, we would not be having as many people.
Be there.
Yeah. So the issue is the pilferage is the biggest problem that we are having. So for us to be able to see anything progressive, first of all, we must be able to deal with that. Then that will also help us now with now our future in terms of now the borrowing. I've always said, for as long as you can qualify to borrow, because there is no way we would be borrowing if we don't qualify.
It means we have the money.
We qualify. And because we qualify, that means we have shown potential to pay.
Yes.
That means the problem is not with our lender. Our lender is guaranteed that their money will get back.
The problem
is with us on how do we then spend some of these monies. We have seen grants come to this country to address specific things. But the question is this money directed and channeled to that? And then we now cascade down to county governments. I will again go back to my 2 points about professionalism and the power of the governors. Some of these governors have 16 secretaries.
For what?
There is a secretary to the secretary, there is a PA to the secretary, and then there is a PA to the PA and an executive assistant and a PA to the driver of the governor. You know, like a lot of unnecessary things that just make our wage bill go up. Because you look at it, I can dare say, I think a quarter of the staff in county governments are not required. And then before even those ones that are not required, then now go to the ghost workers. The ghost workers is another menace. We were able to see Simbarati get so frustrated that he lined up vehicles
and said kila driver,
every driver to stand with
asimame na gari yake. No, it sometimes it takes us to such
you know? It can be so frustrating. It can be extremely.
You did what?
Churchill,
he lined them up.
Churchill, you didn't know that story.
No,
he said kila mtu asimame na ile gari wa anaendesha.
How effective was it?
Because you see, it's what advice is talking about. When you go to look at the number of drivers you have in Kisii County, and you're seeing you have 120 drivers and you only have 30 vehicles.
30 vehicles.
It doesn't make sense.
So
by lining them up, if he was able to find that this is yours.
Now, what actually came out of it is some of the drivers on record were not drivers even on qualification. Forget the car.
So they didn't even have.
They didn't even have a driving
paper.
license in the first place. Now, apart from you having a driving license, you can fail to have a driving license and have ability to drive. Now, some of them did not have both a driving license and they did not have ability to drive. So you wonder then, what qualification is then being peddled here? You look at what was happening the other day in the county government of Nairobi.
Yes.
And during the Senate hearing.
Mismatch of jobs.
And the Senate was asking the governor, in the firefighting department, the head of the unit
has a degree
in theology. So, and people are wondering, so are we preaching to the fire? Or are we, what exactly are we doing?
And you know, actually,
not to say that a degree in theology is the issue.
No, the degree in theology is not the issue. Even the holder of the degree in theology is not the problem. The question is, what is this march about? Because this is a fire. This is
disaster
management. Yeah, and we know how disastrous the disaster in Nairobi can be. Yeah, it is not as rare as a disaster should actually be. It is something that really occurs. But then you have put theology at the heart of the management of fire.
Then there was a librarian
and then there was also a librarian, I don't know, reading about fire. So there's a lot of mismatch in some of these things, and that becomes the critical problem of then our expenditure. It is not about the money first. I can assure you, these noises we hear about the money is not enough, trust me, we must remember to always ask ourselves, we must remember that the corruption we hear is about the little money
that we have.
So question is, what about when that money is, because the constitution says that money to counties should be at least 15%
of the total budget.
What they receive is less than 10%.
But they still steal all that.
But do you know that if you made an audit, I would dare say, of county government since 2013 when it started devolution, then maybe no governor would be working scot-free.
And the other thing I think that we have seen previously and having engaged with some of the county governments, it affects most of the county governments. On the public service, the bloatedness of the public service, I think much of it was attributed to the governors, especially the first governors, when they came in, they were able to fill the positions with
Yeah.
their people.
From scratch.
Yeah.
With their people. And then when the other governor, for example, if you went for county A, 00 or whatever, or you were a first-time governor and you went for one term, when the new governor came in, he wants to have his people in the public service.
Yes.
So he duplicates roles.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a specific county that I went to, and I got into this office that had a director, and there were 3 directors with desks.
So from successive governments, clearly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
3 directors. And so one of them, his role is just to read newspapers. He says he doesn't have paid
A
the
JD.
role. Exactly. Paid
yeah.
the money of the
Of
salary
the
of the
director.
director.
I was actually having a conversation yesterday evening with one of the former directors of PR for one of the counties. And he was telling me how for the 5 years he existed in that office, there is no job he ever did.
And they're being paid
His
the
job was
salary of a
purely to
director.
read newspapers, because he says every time he presented the blueprint he needs to run the county government, the governor seemed disinterested. Only for him to realize later that he was basically employed to fill up an ethnic gap.
So it was a balanced thing.
It was a balanced thing. He was not really required to be there. So he realizes,
Quite sad.
these guys do not actually even need me here. The issue is they needed to prove to the public that now we have this person from wherever.
We are inclusive.
Yeah, we are. It was about inclusivity.
The 30% outside of something.
The county, yes.
So you look at it and then you discover that is part of the problem that we are actually dealing with. So it is not always about, yes, for me, the budget is important, where we get the money, the borrowing and whatever. But in the first place, the prudent utilization of the funds that we already have is the most important element of it. And I would dare say some of the best, these maybe would not be agreed upon so much, but some of the funds that are actually used prudently in this country are the ones that belong to members of parliament, the CDF.
Why? What is the issue, advice? Is it in the systems? Is it in the transparency? Because I know like the CDF, there's a CDF committee.
Yes.
And we have seen when CDF is misused, the whole committee is actually held to account.
Exactly.
And they are even prosecuted, you know?
Yes.
So is it that what do we need to do for the county differently? Because even with the national government, yes, there's pilferage, but it's not to the levels that we see in county government. So what is missing?
It is first of all, there's a system problem. Of course, the mother of the problem is morality.
Yes.
That is the mother of the problem. But you remember CDF is governed nationally. We have a CDF board.
Yes.
At the national level that controls the CDF in all the constituencies. So for every member of parliament, he has a person who is seconded from the office the other side, who is not necessarily his personal employee.
No.
This person answers to CDF directly. And therefore,
So they can't play games.
There's no play game that the MP really has. So that's why then the member of parliament's interest become, where does the money go? In terms of we need the development in this school and not this school and whatever. So the money still goes for the use. The politician is only having the luxury to decide where.
Where?
You get? So then that is able to help. So then the systems in county government, now that's where there is a problem. Because we established our counties without necessarily having a very clear system to it. So the alpha and omega of county governments is the governor. And that's why I've told you, if someone can have as much power as to decide whether a deputy has an office or not,
You can imagine what they do with your money.
So you can imagine, what about the money then? So this is a person who has every say about procurement, where does the tender go, and everything about it. So the system problem emanates there in the first place. So the people who are able to benefit are those ones who are in good books of the boss. So we must be able to have systems that actually work. Right. Systems that are very outlined, that we can be able to know that when there is a problem at county, then you imagine, Towett, do you know for every problem at the county, it must wait for the Auditor General. Now, the Auditor General has to work 47 counties. So what about the audit down here? Who is auditing at the county level? So it becomes a big mess. The Auditor General, even if he was to take 3 months per county,
it's not possible.
So ask yourself, 47 times 3 months per county.
Then for the constituencies, you find also there is the public what we'll call the civic accountability.
True.
The projects of the CDF are very close to the people.
Yeah.
And so you realize that the MPs and the members of parliament are so much, they're
exposed.
They're exposed.
Yeah.
So they have to deliver. And if you don't deliver, these things are going to fall back on you politically.
Yeah.
So I think those are some also the other things that make CDF. And it is true, even when you talk to most of the people who want to do business with government, they would rather deal with the
CDF and not the county
because
government.
of the efficiencies that exists even in the payments.
All right, Churchill, SHIF, we are moving from NHIF to SHIF, and the issues that the ghosts of NHIF and the burden in terms of
it's being transferred
again in terms of pending bills and ghost working and what have you, because we saw that part of NHIF's problem was also the structuring and the human resource in NHIF, because again there was a lot of ghost workers, there was a lot of duplication of jobs, and so most of the money of NHIF went to pay recurrent expenditure instead of being remitted to some of these hospitals, and so the mess came about as is. Do you think we've fixed our systems enough for us to roll out SHIF?
I think there's still work to be done. First, we have to appreciate that SHIF is going to be, the burden, it's going to have a huge burden on the payer. Trust you me. And people should be ready for it, because you are looking at about 2.75% of payment, or payment from the gross salary. So if you are earning 1 million, like
advice,
you are expecting to pay about 27,000 shillings per month. So it's gonna be.
It is huge.
It's huge. So it's really gonna have an impact on the paycheck of many people. And above that, there has been conversation, and I think they have mentioned about the comprehensiveness of the scheme. It's now covering, more people. Remember that NHIF, of course, only covered those who are salaried or those who are within informal sector who are able to pay 500 shillings, or those who could be paid for 500 shillings. But now, in terms of the UHC, the government envisions to have everybody onboarded, and I think that is part of what SHIF seeks to achieve, to ensure that everybody is covered by the government. So the overall picture, for me, if implemented, will be good. Other than the impact on the paycheck, the overall picture will be good, because there are people when you travel across the country who are cannot be able to afford very basic healthcare, very, very basic healthcare, and if government can come in to help them through some of these support systems, then it will be very helpful. There are also other medical services that NHIF could not be able to cater for. So the hope is that SHIF then will be able to cater for these, even some of the emerging non-communicable diseases, that NHIF could not cater for. Very expensive services, like those who need to go for radiotherapy and things like that. They had dialysis. They had to go for private insurance.
It's very expensive.
Exactly. So I think that if SHIF, irrespective of the cost that is going to have on people, if well implemented, and I underline the word well implemented, the value for money, then people will see the goodness of this. Because you see, I pay NHI for my parents, and it's because at least I can be able to pay. But there is somebody somewhere who cannot be able, an old person somewhere who cannot be able to pay up to pay that, and this is coming in to help them, and it is paid by people who are. So the challenge that government has is advice is paying 1 million, is earning 1 million, is being deducted 27,000 or around 26,000 something.
Yeah.
And he expects that when he goes to the hospital, he's treated to the value of the money that he is remitting. Now, if that does not, of course, he might not be able to get that because this thing is covering his money, is also supporting some other person in the village. But at least the challenge that this transition needs to look at is not to repeat the mistakes of NHIF. Because the moment they repeat the mistake of NHIF, it then will negate the very gains that this thing would have done. For example, you'll go to hospitals and you find there are some of the medical facilities or drugs that should have been catered for you are not there. Then you will attribute it to the failure of the scheme. And it could be a failure of the what? It could be a failure of the what? Of the hospital.
Right.
The other thing is that you might find that there are hospitals that, and this has happened in NHIF, hospitals will inflate the cost of services.
Yes.
All right. Then the inflation of the cost of services then impacts on the cost that NHIF or SHIF will then have to pay. So I think the details around that really needs to be thought through and looked at so that the value for the money would. But I can tell you for free that this is something that I think that the conversation around the social health insurance fund is something that began even within the Kibaki regime. Yeah. Remember, there was a conversation around, I think that time it was called SS something.
Yes.
So this thing is something that was just a matter of time. And it was just waiting for somebody to roll it out. So the issue is how now to roll it in a manner that will bring value to the people and so that people see its goodness.
All right. Advice.
Yeah.
Universal health care.
Yeah.
Are we ever going to achieve? And finally, is it SHIF that is going to take us there? Because even with all its issues, I think for the KK government, this would be a legacy project to ensure that every Kenyan is able to access quality health care and even timely. And a health care that, is well-equipped, resourced, properly. Because we signed the Abuja Protocol to say that a certain percent of our budget annually should go to healthcare, which we have not seen happen. But do you think now with SHIF coming in and how we are going to contribute differently to SHIF, unlike what we did for NHIF, that we'll finally be able to achieve universal health coverage?
I think, first of all, I listened even to the CS talk about this, and she did a very good job in trying to really make the point understood out there. And I wouldn't want to be part of the people who are always doubting Thomas's, because sometimes every time government wants to come up with something, we spend our time talking about how it will not work.
It will not happen.
So I would want to really give government that benefit of doubt, because I look at how they are looking at it, and part of the biggest concerns for Kenyans was like, one, are our NHIF proceeds going to disappear? Mm-hmm. And I like that they have said that will just be able to transition to SHIF, which is a good thing. And also, the women of this country were asking about the Linda Mama care that had been there, and it has been of very great help to very many people. It is a good thing that is also part and parcel of what you are then paying for. In fact, they say now it's even better, because while Linda Mama only took care of you during childbirth, this one takes care of you post-childbirth, and also takes care of both the mother, the child, and the father. So that makes it a better scheme altogether. I also like the aspect of emergency services, that now we are going to have a scheme that can take care of emergency services. That is good enough. And also the critical illnesses, because now we have, you all of us, I'm sure, have at one point or the other had a family member, a friend, a relative who has suffered from cancer. And we know how expensive it can be. It is crazy. Apart from just even how bad it is on the patient themselves, even on the rest of you as a society, the costs are extremely high. So if they are really, by the fact that they are saying these will also be part and parcel of what is being taken care of, I think that is a good thing, and It's a move towards the right direction. Now, this 2.75% of what is being asked for, I hear they are saying 2.75% per year. But then what I'm not getting the clarity is it 2.75% per year of your monthly salary or of your yearly?
Actually, that's a very good. Doctor is going to do a research for us.
I'm doing the math
quickly.
So I don't know what exactly that. I think the clarity needs to come out more so that it's 2.5% of what. And two, the formula of getting the 2.5% out of non-salaried people.
How is it going to happen?
Needs to really be explained. How exactly is it being because I saw the CS talk about your expenditure patterns are always known. And so you cannot be able to hide how much money you make. But some of these personal assistants who transact a lot of money that is not theirs.
No, actually, yes.
So if you're going to use, for example, their data on the phone, and some of these people are receiving 300,000 every day to be told to send to whoever, send to a funeral here, send to whoever there. So yes, my data can be very, like my history can be very good, but most of that money is not mine. It's like people who work in the bank.
It's in transit.
It's always money in transit. It's not necessarily mine. So how do you actually take care of that? I'm not seeing clarity in the explanation of that. And also, I like the aspect of government is going to pay for people who have no income at all. I would want to understand how is government going to also identify these the criteria of people who are being said to have no income at all. It's a good thing that government is paying for them, but then the formula of getting them, so that again it doesn't become another scandal, so that we have people who will just be able to lump some people together for political expediency and put them on the scheme at the expense of the real people who actually should have been here. So that is it. That is how I look at it. I look at it as a very good scheme. I look at it as very progressive, but I have similar concerns with Churchill in terms of the implementation of it. We also hope it will just be as effective. Because remember, already we have issues with this NHIF. I'm hoping a lot of issues. I'm hoping this implementation, because you can imagine someone paying 2.75% and not receiving services. It will be a very big dip. But if implemented effectively, I would dare say this would be the legacy project of President William Ruto.
All right.
I think
Churchill, you were to give us some.
I think the 2.7% it should be monthly on the monthly gross.
So that makes it how much in a year? For example, with advisor's salary of 1 million.
Oh, 1 million. So for advisor's salary of
very quick on that.
So for advisor's salary of 1 million, we got so in one, so that's 27,500
in a month.
Now you are imagining if he was to pay it
12 months,
assuming that this was
monthly.
No, assuming that this was per year, then that will come to only that will come to only
percent of 12 million.
No, that will come to only 2,291. So you see, it's not realistic. So it means that it is per month. Then when you now pay per year,
yes,
it comes to 330,000
against 12 million.
12 million.
Because what you receive cumulatively in a year.
Yes. So I think that the annual could be now for those who are salaried, then they'll be able to pay this per month.
Okay.
But you see now, like what used to happen in NHIF, where, for example, it's 500 per month, but you pay per year.
Yes.
6,000.
Yes.
So there are the segments of people who will be able the specific groups, who can offset these in 1 year. But I think now the details around that is now which advice is asking the data. How will you be able to
come out clearly?
Yes, how will you be able to, what data will you be able to use to ascertain that this person can pay this amount of money and this person cannot be able to pay, and so we quantify him as a government to be paid for by the government.
With real data, not empirical data.
And then Towett, you're looking at a situation where we have one person. I'm now looking at exclusivity of now again different people, because you are looking at someone who is paying 300,000.
Yes.
and another one who is paying 3,000 per year. And now, this scheme seeks to make everybody equal. So, just from a psychological perspective, what is the expectation of this 300,000 payer when he goes to the hospital?
Is that he's treated like a VIP?
Vis-a-vis this other one. Are we going to look at a situation therefore where we are going to have, you go to KNH, the hospital, and then you find my member of parliament there together with myself, all of us are on the same line waiting for treatment because we are being covered equally. So I look at how also the difference would be in terms of exclusivity, because we have people who want to be more exclusive in terms of they don't want to get to hospital and not be and be treated equally with anyone else. They want their services rendered a different kind of way. That's why they pay for different kinds of cover.
All right. Yeah. And Churchill is quickly going to step out for I think kuna mkubwa amepiga
anaenda kulipa tax levy,
ameenda kulipa SHIF. No problem, but we have come also to the end of the segment.
Yeah.
And advice.
Yes.
It is always good having you.
Thank you.
And you know, your perspective in how you look at things, and you have even challenged me to go further and do my research just to know, is this 2.7% on my annual salary or monthly, you know, even as we disseminate this information to Kenyans, it is good that we disseminate the right information, because we are also going to contribute to the conversation on whether Kenyans are ready for this program to be rolled out or not. And if they are ready, why should they be ready? Why is it good for them? If they are not ready also, what are the concerns? And how can we better then the conversation that it is objective and contributes positively to the national development of our country? Because at the end of the day, what is important? That we all win, you know, that we are all taken care of by this government, regardless of whether you voted them in or not. Once a government is in place, it should take care of everyone, you know. True. And this has been a very great and wonderful conversation. Advice?
Thank you.
What have you been up to? Umepotea sana bwana.
Mimi niko tu, I've been up and down. I've been, of course, running a few party matters. You know, we have very many court cases as a party. But also running Youth Bridge Kenya, we have an upcoming convention.
Yes, I know you have something coming up.
Yes, and also just doing a bit of leadership training here and there.
All right. Yeah. That is good to hear. And thank you for joining us this morning, Advice, and heeding to our call. I know sometimes I feel so bad when we ask you to come, because I know it's very early, and when someone lives quite far, it means they have to leave quite early. Yes. But we thank you. We thank you for heeding to our call and coming in to have this conversation with us. I have been your host, Chepkoech Towett, and like we said, this week is going to be one of those weeks that we really have to be vigilant and look out, you know, to see some of these things we've been talking about for the last a month or 2 months. Now, ultimately, what has it come to? You know, what does it mean for the country, for the budget, for the next financial year, that is 2024-2025? And we will be doing our utmost best to ensure that we'll give you the right information and timely also information. Here on from State of the Nation, we have enjoyed the conversation. We thank you for joining us, even to our viewers, and we ask you to like, subscribe, share, comment. And if you missed this segment, don't worry, it will be uploaded to our YouTube, and you can always go back and follow and just listen into what was discussed this morning. Thank you to our guest, that is Churchill and Advice. I have been your host, Chepkoech Towett, on the Tackle State of the Nation. See you tomorrow, same place, same time on Siasa Wednesday. Have a good day.